You cut your finger, and there is no sink, no soap, no bandage, no doctor, and no antibiotic coming to save you. Just one thin line of blood. One small opening in the skin. Today, that sounds annoying. Back then, that could become the beginning of a death sentence. In modern life, a tiny cut usually does not scare you. You slice an apple, nick your finger, rinse it under clean water, use soap, grab a bandage, maybe add ointment, and move on. By tomorrow, you may barely remember it happened. Not because the cut was harmless, because modern life surrounded it with protection before danger had time to grow. Clean water is nearby, soap is nearby, bandages are nearby, a pharmacy is nearby, a doctor is available if things get worse. And if infection starts to spread, antibiotics may stop it before it takes over the body. That tiny wound is not safe by itself. It is safe because an entire medical system is standing behind it. Now remove all of that. Remove the sink, remove the soap, remove the clean towel, remove the sterile bandage, remove the pharmacy, remove the doctor, remove the hospital, remove antibiotics, remove the idea that sweaver or pus can be handled quickly. Suddenly, a tiny cut is not tiny anymore. It is a doorway, and the outside world can get in. Today, infection is usually a medical problem. Back then, infection was a survival problem. A cut could become swelling. Swelling could become weakness. Weakness could slow walking. Slower walking could mean less food, more danger, and more pressure on the group. The wound was only the first problem. The real danger began after the skin broke. Ancient humans did not need germ theory to notice when a wound turned bad. They could see redness. They could feel heat. They could smell rot. They could notice pus. They could watch fever drain strength from a person. If a wound looked bad yesterday and worse today, that meant something. The body was sending a warning. And injuries were everywhere. A stone tool could slip. A thorn could stab a foot. A sharp rock could scrape a leg. An animal bite could tear skin. A burn from fire could blister. A long walk could crack skin open. Butchering animals could mix blood, dirt, and sharp edges into one very bad situation. Not exactly a clean hospital room. Some dangers were harder to avoid. Childbirth could open the body to infection. Dental problems could become deep pain. Parasites could weaken people over time. Dirty water could make the body sick from the inside. Cold, hunger, and exhaustion could make healing harder. Skin was the first wall. Once that wall broke, ancient humans had very few backup systems. That made one person's wound a group problem. If someone could not walk, the group had to adjust. If someone could not gather food, others had to carry more work. If fever started, that person needed water, warmth, rest, and protection. If the group had to move, the sick person slowed them down. If the group left them behind, they might die. Infection did not only attack one body. It changed the group's survival math. That is brutal because the human body is not sealed like a tank. It leaks, it bruises, it tears, it swells, it gets fever, it needs water, food, warmth, and rest. A human body is impressive, but it is also a walking maintenance project with feelings. And one infected wound in the wrong place could stop the whole machine. So here is the survival paradox. Ancient humans were fragile. They lived with dirt, blood, animals, weather, parasites, sharp tools, and no antibiotics. Many infections probably killed people, and yet enough humans survived. So how? Not with one miracle cure. Not with secret prehistoric antibiotics. They survived by reducing risk, noticing danger early, resting when possible, caring for each other, and turning painful experience into group knowledge. Archaeologists do not find a perfect medical handbook from prehistoric life. They find clues. Stone tools show the sharp edges people made and used. Hearths show places where fire mattered. Animal bones with cut marks suggest butchery, hunting, or scavenging. Dental evidence can show wear, pain, and disease. And sometimes, ancient human remains show injuries that healed. A healed injury matters because healing takes time. And time often means care. These clues do not let us see every wound, every fever, or every desperate night. We cannot say every group treated injuries the same way, but the pattern is clear enough to matter. Some injured people lived long enough to heal. Someone may have brought water. Someone may have shared food. Someone may have kept them warm. Someone may have protected them when they were too weak to protect themselves. Survival was not always solo. The first weapon was caution. That sounds boring. But without antibiotics, boring could be brilliant. Avoiding a wound was better than trying to survive one. Ancient humans had to move carefully through rough ground. They had to handle sharp tools with skill. They had to learn which plants, rocks, animals, insects, and places caused injury. Prevention was not fear, it was strategy. But caution had limits. A person could be careful and still get hurt. Stone tools were sharp, fire burned, thorns existed, predators existed. Rocks did not politely move out of the way. Accidents happened. A human could avoid 10 dangers and still step on the 11th. So caution helped, but it did not solve everything. The second weapon was cleaning when possible. Not modern cleaning, no soap, no sterile water, no disinfectant, no clean white bandage from a package. But ancient humans could still notice obvious danger. Dirt in a wound was bad, rot was bad, a deep wound that smelled worse was bad. A wound full of debris was not something to ignore. When water was available, they may have rinsed wounds, they may have removed visible dirt, splinters, or grit. They may have tried to keep a wound away from more filth. That did not make the wound safe. Water could be contaminated. Hands were not sterile. Leaves, hides, fibers, or cloth-like coverings were not modern bandages. But imperfect care was still better than no care at all. The third weapon was rest. A wounded body needs time. Movement can reopen skin. Hunger weakens the body. Cold drains energy. Thirst makes fever worse. If an infected person kept walking, carrying, hunting, or gathering too soon, the body had less energy to fight. Rest was not laziness. Rest was the body trying not to lose. But rest was expensive. Someone resting was not gathering food. Someone with fever was not watching children. Someone unable to walk might slow the group. If food was scarce, feeding someone who could not help was difficult. If danger came, a weak person could not run or defend themselves. So rest only worked when the group could protect it. That is where survival became social. The fourth weapon was support. A sick person alone was in deep trouble. A sick person inside a group had a better chance. Someone could bring water. Someone could share food. Someone could keep the fire going. Someone could help them stay warm. Someone could watch for danger while they slept. The group became the closest thing to a hospital, just with more smoke and fewer forms to fill out. This mattered because the body itself was the main medicine. Without antibiotics, the immune system had to do the fighting. Food gave it energy. Water helped the fevered body keep going. Warmth saved strength. Rest reduced strain. Protection kept the weak person alive long enough for healing to happen. None of these guaranteed survival, but together they gave the body a chance. The fifth weapon was observation. Ancient humans had to read the body like a warning system. Redness, swelling, heat, pain, pus, bad smell, fever, weakness, confusion. A wound changing for the worse was information. The body was talking, and ancient humans had to listen without microscopes, lab tests, or doctors. Observation helped the group make decisions. This person needs rest. This wound should not be rubbed with more dirt. This fever needs water. This injury is getting worse. This person should not walk far today. But observation had limits. It could not reveal bacteria. It could not stop sepsis. It could not explain what was happening inside the blood. Sometimes a body looked manageable until it suddenly was not. And this is where the real weapon appears. The real weapon was memory. One person survives a certain kind of wound after resting near the fire. The group remembers. One person gets worse after walking too soon. The group remembers. A certain place causes cuts, bites, or sickness again and again. The group remembers. Pain became pattern. Pattern became warning. Warning became teaching. Teaching mattered because children could not learn every lesson by personal disaster. Do not touch that. Do not step there. Do not drink from that place. Do not ignore swelling. Do not keep walking if the wound opens again. Do not treat every small injury like it is nothing. Ancient children did not need a medical textbook. They needed adults who had survived enough mistakes to point at danger before it pointed back. None of this worked alone. Caution reduced injuries. Cleaning removed obvious danger when possible. Rest gave the body time. Warmth saved energy. Food supported strength. Water helped during fever. The group protected the weak. Observation noticed when things got worse. Memory helped people avoid repeating the same mistake. One small advantage connected to another. Cleaning without rest was weak. Rest without food was weak. Food without protection was weak. Protection without observation was blind. Observation without memory repeated the same danger next time. That is the key twist. Without antibiotics, survival was not one cure. It was a system. The body was the battlefield. The group was the support system. Culture stored the hard lessons. But ancient humans were not secretly better doctors than modern people. They were not. They did not understand germs the way we do. They did not have antibiotics. They did not have sterile surgery. They did not have lab tests. They did not have a safe pharmacy nearby. And natural remedies, if used, were not magic replacements for modern medicine. Many people still died. Survival also varied a lot. A small cut in one environment might heal. A similar cut somewhere hotter, wetter, dirtier, colder, or more parasite-filled might become deadly. Some groups had better access to water. Some had harsher weather. Some moved often. Some had more stable camps. Some injuries were survivable. Others were probably a death sentence. We cannot know every detail, but the larger pattern is clear. The question is not why everyone survived infection. They did not. The better question is why enough people survived often enough for groups to continue. And the answer is not glamorous. Avoid the wound if possible. Clean what can be cleaned. Rest when possible. Feed the weak when possible. Keep them warm. Watch the body. Remember what happened. Teach the next person sooner. Modern life makes infection feel smaller than it really is. A cut becomes a bandage. A fever becomes medicine. A swollen wound becomes a doctor visit. Ancient life exposed the danger. A wound was not just damage. It was a question. Can the body fight? Can the group help? Can the person rest long enough? Can yesterday's mistake become tomorrow's warning? Ancient humans did not survive deadly infections because they had secret antibiotics. They survived because they reduced risk, watched the body carefully, protected the weak, shared food and warmth, and turned painful experience into knowledge. They were not stronger than infection. They were fragile bodies inside a social system. And sometimes that system was enough.